Talk Radio, you're in to all things music.
Keep doing what you're doing and don't rush. Breathe and be in the moment of what you're doing when you're doing it and appreciate it, because it only happens that one time. So enjoy the journey, and that's more what it's about than necessarily the destination.
Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Welcome to Making It with me, your host, Terry Woolman. I really appreciate you joining us every week, and I know I say that every week, and that's because I mean it. It's the truth. You can find all of our episodes on entertalkmedia.com, Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes under podcast. If just look up Making It with Terry Woolman. And if you like the show, and I think you will, as a matter of fact, I know you will. Today's guest is great. Make sure that you go and log on and subscribe to all of our episodes. They're free. You can download and stream them and make a comment, and we'll reply, and just take a listen. There's a lot of really cool, very generous information from the many artists and various folks that have been on the show over the last couple of years. So thanks for joining us today. I created this show to focus on what it takes to have a lasting career in the ever-changing landscape of the music business. And boy, does it change every day. My guest today is Nate Morton. Let me tell you about Nate. Nate Morton is the drummer for the house band on NBC's TV show The Voice. He has toured with artists Natalie Cole, Chaka Kahn, Paul Stanley, Poe, the American Idol band, Vanessa, Carlton, and Miley, Cyrus. His TV appearances include playing in the house band for Mark Burnett's Rockstar INXS, Rockstar Supernova, The Bonnie Hunt Show, MTV's Rock the Cradle, and the Grammy Awards Show with Madonna. Morton is endorsed by Pearl Drums, RhythmTech, Zildjian drumsticks and cymbals, Roland Electronics, and V-Drums and Remo drumheads. He is a graduate of the renowned Berklee College of Music, cites Animal from the Muppets as his primary influence, and thanks his parents and his first drum instructor, Grant Menfee, for their early support of his musical aspirations. In his own words, as Nate puts it, the bottom line is, I hit things with sticks for a living, and that's a pretty fun job. Nate Morton, welcome to Making It.
Terry Woolman, thank you for having me on Making It. I gotta say, I'm still sort of dwelling on your playing music, because I could literally see the band in the corner and you at the desk and me maybe at a chair beside the desk and the whole stage set and everything. It was rad.
Right. That's great. So
rad.
Tell everybody about that little piece of music, because that's one of the many cool things that you've played on.
Oh, I was actually talking about your play-on music for your show.
My play-on music. Oh, thank you.
Yes. It immediately took me to like the set of a talk show. I feel like I'm sitting on stage at NBC Universal doing a show, sitting with you. That's what I was saying. I could see the band in the corner and everything.
Right. Oh, right. Like the old days.
Terry, like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Nate, that kind of makes sense that it would be that way, because I used to work at NBC on, doing the music directing the Byron Allen show. And so it is part of my roots. We both.
Makes perfect sense.
You and I, one of the many things we shared besides a friendship is that we have both had the unique opportunity to be in house bands for late night. Well, not just late night talk shows, but music TV shows. And I was going to say it's an elite group of people. And I don't mean that in that anybody is more special than anybody else, but it's elite in that you and I and some of our peers have had the opportunity and have not wasted it to have jobs, working in television.
Sure.
On shows that really appreciate music.
Right. And I was going to say, I understand what you mean when you say elite, because it's not to suggest that only we're allowed to do it. But I think about it in the context of there are only so many of those kinds of gigs that exist. That's kind of the way I think about it. I mean, there's only a small handful. So like you, I consider myself very fortunate to have been a part of a few of those opportunities.
And again, I don't think you've wasted it. I mean, because your focus is razor sharp. You really, whatever the gig is. I mean, you and I've had the opportunity to play together, on non-TV things, and you show up with the same 100%. What do you need? Attitude every time you pick up your drumsticks and sit down and play. And I really appreciate and respect that in you. And I know that's what it takes. Can you talk about that for a minute? Attitude.
Well, it's interesting because much the same way, sometimes, a band will have a particularly great night. And to me, that's always cyclical. Like, in other words, what I'm getting back from the audience directly affects what I'm putting back into it. And if I can put back more, then the audience gives me more. And it's like a cyclical kind of thing. And for me, I have to admit that music and my attitude are very much the same thing. When I play, I very much enjoy playing. And sort of because I'm thinking about like, wow, I'm getting the opportunity to play, it makes me enjoy it more. And it literally is like a cyclical thing. So I don't approach it necessarily from a cognitive point of view of, hey, I'm going to approach the situation and have a good attitude about it. It's more like it's hard for me to stop myself from having a good attitude about it, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Because every day I'm sort of confronted with the fact that I am fortunate to do what I do for a job. And so in terms of my attitude, now in terms of always giving 100%, I don't know why that is. There are times when I sit down and maybe I don't feel so great, or maybe my elbow is bothering me, or maybe I've got a headache, and I kind of go, okay, you know what, man, look, it's a rehearsal. Take it easy, relax, just get to the rehearsal. Don't kill yourself. And before I know it, I'm swinging at the drums with the sticks from behind my head. So, I don't do calm down very well. I don't do dial it back to 65%. It just, and I mean, I kind of, I don't really jokingly reference Animal as an influence, because Animal actually is an influence, because, Animal was like, when I was a kid, it was like, oh, you mean all this stuff that people are telling me to constantly calm down and constantly relax and constantly don't bounce off the wall? I can actually take that and channel it towards something that's cool and good and effective and positive? Oh, right. Okay. So that's where I'm coming from with it, Yeah, I was going to ask you about Animal, because I knew that wasn't a joke. I mean, I know that you're a funny guy and humor is a part of your life, but that was a real reference, and I'm glad that you just dug right in to talk about that. I mean, because so you were like a pretty energetic kid. Were you focused back then, or just energetic? That's a great question. If I were born today, in today's day and age where we are so medication happy, I would certainly be on like a full, laundry list of medications. Yes. So yeah, I was unfocused until finding drums, and drums was my Ritalin or whatever, right. Because it was definitely that. If I hadn't found drums, it could have been a very different sort of tale. But yeah, so as a kid in general, I was focused around playing music. In fact, I got to say, I was focused around playing piano as well. Music was a part of my life from a pretty early age, and when I was able to avail myself of those things, the drums and the piano, then yeah, I was able to focus. But in general,
you come from a musical family, Nate?
Not even a little bit. No.
Yeah, me neither.
My dad played the radio.
Yeah.
And that was about the size of it. But yeah, I don't really come from a musical family, so it's kind of funny that I found my way to it.
So we're talking about growing up. We're going to get to that in a minute, because I want to talk about your original family, early years growing up in Columbia, Maryland, and all of that. But I want to kick off this conversation with two quotes of yours that seem like they have nothing to do with each other. They might not even be from the same person, but I think they kind of define in some ways who you are. And these are things that you have written like on your Facebook feed or various things. So one of the reasons I invited you on the show is because you really have a strong point of view and you believe in sharing information and, in some way being a mentor. You're always open and willing to answer questions from other musicians. And so here's what I recently read of things that you had said. And these are quotes. I was willing to sacrifice everything prior to my move to LA. My mom asked me, how long are you going to struggle in LA until you give up? And my answer was, I will struggle as long as it takes. And then I read another quote of yours that said, there are gigs and professional musician stuff. Then there are the things that are more important. # daughters, parenting, fatherhood, family. These are two quotes appear that they might not even have been said by the same person. But in actuality, I think that they define the core of who you are. Can you talk about those things that you said and where you sit with all of that?
Terry, this may be the best sort of posed question that I've ever come across in a podcast, because you're welcome, because you have touched on sort of two important things, and you have given me a little bit of a springboard. So I just want to share with you the sacrifice everything quote was literally me reflecting on where my attitude was when I was in college. So at that time, did not have kids, when I was in college, was not married, lived in an apartment that I shared with 4 other dudes, a 2-bedroom apartment, you know what I mean? Or 3 other dudes rather. And so, yes, so for me at that point, the idea of sacrificing everything, or the idea of, going for it, was where my head was at. And that quote came from basically a message that I wrote as a response to a friend who asked me, do you think I could be a professional musician? Do you think I have what it takes to quote unquote make it? Now, as I've gotten older, I do have more experience with those things. I do have several kids. I do have a wife. I do have, these obligations that I'm fortunate to have, quite frankly. And so the earlier quote is 18-year-old me. Mm-hmm. And the more recent quote is, 40-year-old me. No, I'm 47. I don't. 47. I'm happy with 47. I feel
you're still a young man.
Well, and I've earned these 47 years. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They've come with a certain amount of experience and knowledge, and so I appreciate these 47 years. But so obviously, if you're in a situation like that, then the idea of sacrificing everything is not exactly as practical as it is when you're an 18-year-old just out of college.
Right. And I actually think that both points of view or mindsets, intentions are incredibly important and valuable. We wouldn't be having this conversation today if you hadn't have said that first quote, I am willing to sacrifice everything. But also, I don't know that we'd be having this conversation if you hadn't have said that second thing as well, because I gravitate towards artists and friends. I mean, you and I are friends, but I respect you, and part of the reason I respect you is that you have a life, and you manage to find balance, which I know is incredibly challenging with kids and the type of job that you have right now. But you strive for that, and I think that your family makes you a better musician, and your the integrity and focus that you had in developing yourself as a musician and artist make you a better father and husband.
Well, Terry, let me touch. I would, and I would say you just used a word that is central to my sort of mindset, and it's a word that the first time it came up, I've gone to this well a few times. This is a story that I've told a couple of times now. Mm-hmm. I have a great friend. His name is Tony DiAugustine. He's an outstanding drummer, and way back when I was first contemplating moving to New York, to LA. Tony lives in New York. That's why I said that. Mm-hmm. When I was contemplating moving to LA. And Tony lived out here. I said to him, Tony, what's the hardest thing about being a professional musician? And I was probably about 28 5 or so at the time, and I had not moved here yet. And Tony said the hardest thing is finding a balance. And I said, a balance between what? And he said, a balance between everything.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was like, balance between everything? What the heck does that mean? What is he talking about? Balance between everything? What am I supposed to do with that? You know what I mean?
Right.
But with every passing year and more, I realized just what he meant by that. I mean, in our industry, it is a balance between, being willing to sacrifice versus having a family. It's a balance between doing gigs that you love versus maybe the gigs that pay more, let's say. It's a balance between touring and you're on the road and having a good time, but you're also away from home and you're missing home. So, I mean, there's, it is a constant sort of balancing act. So I am fortunate now that, as you can speak to as well, having a working position on a television show does enable you the opportunity to sort of find as close to that proper balance as I've been able to find thus far anyway.
Right. Well, right. For a perfect example, right before we started this conversation, you were driving your daughter to school this morning.
Well, actually, I was racing her over. I was dropping her off. I did say that in my text to you. I was dropping her off to her mom, who was at the dentist. So I was dropping start again, Nate. I was dropping my 4-year-old off to her mom, who was at the dentist with my 13-year-old. So, and I had to do this. And so I did not trust my 4-year-old to be quiet while I needed to talk to you.
Oh, so well, there's the balance. Right.
Yes. And then after this, when I finish this, I'll go and I'll pick up my 7-year-old daughter from school. I will do that later.
So let's talk about your family for a moment, and just like a broad stroke, not your immediate family right now, but your mom and dad, siblings, growing up in Maryland. I know you were self-taught as a drummer, like at the early age you started hitting things around 4 years old. Give me just the broad stroke on what it was like growing up in your family.
That's an interesting question. When I started playing drums, my mother and father were fresh out of Tennessee State University. So my primary influences at that point were going and seeing the Tennessee State University marching band and Animal on the Muppets. And so those things inspired me to start building drum sets or collections of boxes and buckets and whatever junk I could find to hit, and piling it together in the middle of the living room floor and, wailing away with, again, salad spoons or something of that nature. Then growing up in my family, so my father, as I said, played the radio. My father was a huge music fan. He was a huge music lover, even though he did not play himself. So that was really, influential. And then as I began to grow a little older, at one point I lived in Nashville, Tennessee, and I had, what did I have? I think I had 4 items in my possession. And those 4 items were my box of Legos, my bicycle, a Tonka truck, and my drum set. And so living in Tennessee, I would go out and I would ride my bike until it got too hot to do so, which was, in the humidity in Tennessee, which was usually around 10:30 in the morning. It was already too hot to really be outside doing anything. Sure. Yeah. Go inside, play with my Tonka truck and my Legos till I got bored, which was around lunchtime, eat lunch, and then basically go and play drums for the rest of the day. And I would just play drums.
Sounds like a good life.
That was it. It's funny. I think to myself sometimes, if I had the amount of exposure that kids have today to iPads and iPods and computers and all this stuff, I have been so focused on playing drums. Like, would that have drawn?
I'm just thinking, to have that schedule again. Sure. I'm going to ride my bike, come in, hit some drums, have some lunch.
Absolutely. I didn't realize that I had it. Yeah. So that was through 4th grade. Somewhere in 4th grade, I had an instructor show me how to hold the drumsticks and how to play a couple of rudiments. And that was a lesson that I would have with my buddy John O'Benedict, who I was in 4th grade with. And we would do that, I believe, like once a week or so. And then eventually I found myself in Maryland, and I was in high school and middle school in Maryland. I had my first band experiences. I don't know if you're familiar with a band called TV on the Radio, but one of the founding members of that band is a guy named Dave Siddick, and he and I went to high school together. And one day I was in the band room playing at Oakland Mills High School in Columbia, Maryland, and this dude I was just wailing away, just playing drums for playing drum's sake. And he stuck his head in the door and he said, you should really come over to my house and we should jam sometime. And I said, okay, what's that? I had never played with another musician, right? So right. My mom loads in my kick drum, snare drum, and hi-hat into her Firebird, her 78 silver Firebird that she had, and she drove me to Dave's. We played all day until the police came, and then the police left, and then we played again until the police came again, and then we said, okay, I guess we should call it a day. But at the end of the day, that became sort of the the genesis for the band that I was in high school, which was this rock band, this garage rock band called Akamili. So that led through high school, and eventually I found myself at Berklee College of Music. Should I keep going, Terry? Is everyone asleep now?
No, I'm good. I'll cut you when it's time.
So that led me to Berklee College of Music. I spent a year at the University of Maryland before going to Berklee College of Music because I mistakenly thought that it was possible to do a mechanical engineering major as something to, I'm making air bunnies, quote unquote.
Oh, to fall back on?
Yeah, I thought I'd fall back on a mechanical engineering major. Like, who does, And so I realized very quickly that for me to dedicate the amount of time and energy and effort to it, I would really have to want to do it. You can't do that as a whim, or at least I couldn't do it as a whim. So my father called me one day. This is something I've shared as well. My father called me one day and I said, hey, Dad, I need $80. And he said, what do you need $80 for? And I said, I got to go buy a chemistry book that I'm never going to crack. And he said, why are you
That's not a good sell.
No, not at all. And he said, why are you never going to crack it? And I said, because I hate being a mechanical engineering major. And this is about 2/3 of the way through my first semester. Halfway through my first semester.
Okay.
And he said, well, what would you major in if it was up to you? And I, without hesitation, said music. Yeah. And then there was a very, 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 very long pause.
Right.
And Dad, to his credit, said, okay, go change your major tomorrow. So I changed my major to music, and then I completed my second semester at University of Maryland as a music major. And I made the determination that I needed to be somewhere where I could sort of get a more modern music education because, you know what I mean, it was primarily classical music. It was marimba and timpani and concert snare drum. So I followed in the footsteps of my drum instructor. I left this out, sorry. Back in high school, or maybe the last year of my middle school, that was it. I started studying with Grant Menfee. And so I started studying with Grant Menfee. I studied with him throughout high school. And then even I continued to see him even once I had gone to the University of Maryland during that year. And then I made the determination that I wanted to transfer to Berklee, and I did. And
I love that you just described Berklee, or your choice in choosing Berklee, because you wanted a more modern education or modern music education, and that's why I chose Berklee years way before you did. And I just want to interject with a question about Berklee, because it is everything that you just described. What's the most valuable lesson that you think you learned while you were at Berklee that helped you get to where you are today, at this present job that you have?
If I were to say a valuable lesson, it's hard to say a particular lesson. What I would say is that Berklee allows you to do things and make mistakes that in the real world would get you fired. But you can make them in that environment and go, oh, I didn't realize my bass drum pedal was that squeaky when I was on a session. Right? So if you do that at Berklee, they go, oh, I hear that squeak there. Well, probably the professor won't notice. Okay, blah, 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 blah. And you realize, like, oh, I didn't hear that squeak, and then you fix it. If you show up to a session in LA and people are getting paid and their budgets and so on, and your bass drum pedal is squeaky, then it becomes a problem. And they go, okay, well, that's what I'm going to do. So there were several lessons like that I learned. And it was also interesting, Berklee, because I had always been the odd duck, that the weird musician kid. And so you go to Berklee and you're surrounded by odd ducks. And so there is at once the realization that, like, oh, I'm actually not really that good. There's a lot of people here who are a lot better than me. So that was a great realization, but it's also a wonderful atmosphere because you realize, hey, everybody here is trying to do the same thing I'm doing, and that's cool. When I first moved to LA, I had a similar experience in the sense that I moved out here and I felt like my gosh, the kid who gave me my Jamba Juice is an aspiring bass player. The guy who, brought me my whatever is an aspiring producer. And it's kind of daunting because you feel like, wow, I'm surrounded by all these unemployed aspiring people. But then at the same time, it's reinvigorating because you realize any opportunity can come at any time through any means and any source, and you may not even realize that it's coming when it does. So
absolutely. By the way, did you move here with a job or an opportunity or a glimmer of hope about where to get started? Yeah,
moving to LA was a leap of faith. Mm-hmm. It was completely a leap of faith. I did not have a gig, and I just no. It was a leap of faith, basically. Although I did move here with a handful of contacts, mainly people that I had met and or played with at Berklee, and so I spent a lot of my time, going through my list of contacts and going, hey. But it is interesting because you find, Terry, where are you from before LA, or were you from here originally?
No, I grew up born and raised in Miami. And kind of did the same as you. I went to the junior college there, which had a lot of the same teachers as the University of Miami, so it was more affordable. And I did 2 years of at a junior college, and then I moved to Boston. And then my story continues along like yours. Moving to LA, not really having any, a couple of phone numbers from people.
Can you relate to this, Terry? Can you relate to this? I am. Before moving, I would get calls like this from friends in LA. I would get calls like this. Man, I wish you were here. I got a call 3 weeks ago to put together for so-and-so. If you were here, man, I totally would have called you. And you're like, oh, man, I got to move to LA. And then you move to LA and you call those same people and crickets.
Tumbleweeds.
Crickets, Terry. I'm like, where's all the kids now that I was missing when I wasn't here?
Yeah. And by the way, that story holds true to, I would say, the majority of the people who have been on this show. Yeah, I mean, the odd jobs in the first year experiences of so many incredibly successful artists and our peers and friends are similar to where you're taking this story. So, what was your odd job, or what did you do to make your rent for the first couple of months? How'd you do this? Visa,
MasterCard.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
I came out. What did I do first? One of the first things that I did was I managed to find a position working as a TA at Musicians Institute.
Nice.
And so I would be over there, which it's funny because at the time, a TA at Musicians Institute paid, I'm not exaggerating, Terry, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that at the time that I moved here, being a TA at Musicians Institute paid less than working at In-N-Out Burger. And that is the truth. So there will be times where I'm making $12 an hour, let's say, and at the end of a 4-hour day, I've made $48, and I walk out and I find a $60 parking ticket on my car because I didn't realize that it was like a permitted zone.
I remember those experiences. Yeah,
right.
It's just debilitating. It takes you to your knees.
It's terrible.
Right.
So I will say this: at that time, I was very, how can I put this? Basically, the thought that was constantly on rotation in my head was, what can I be doing at this exact moment to get a gig? What can I be doing at this exact moment to get a gig? And it was constantly playing. So I was constantly trying to meet people, make connections, gather phone numbers, gather emails, stay in touch with people. If I didn't have anything to do for an afternoon, I would sit at my computer and I would go down my email list and just email people and go, hi. I never did the mass email. I would never do that. That just doesn't sit right with me. So I would write you an email, and I would go, hey, Terry, it's Nate. Man, I moved to town 3 weeks ago, just seeing if you're playing, what you up to, hit me back, it's Nate, bye, whatever.
Right, right, friendly and to the point, yeah.
I just think that you have to, for me, it's connections. Like, I don't want you to get some random Nate Gazette that, like, you and 200 other people got, because then you go, hey, thanks for adding me to your little list, or whatever.
Your name here, right.
And no disrespect to people who do that, it's just not my walk. Like, that's just not my personality. So I was fortunate to have met a couple of people. I called my Zildjian rep, Kirsten, and I said, "Hi, Kirsten, it's Nate. I'm unemployed. Please help."
But right there, you already had an endorsement before you came out. So that's a step. That's a step in a great direction, because I didn't start establishing endorsements until I had already moved here. So that's cool that you had that, and you had the wherewithal to see that as an asset.
Absolutely, and that was a connection that came through Berklee. That was a connection that came through Berklee because I was fortunate to audition for and win the Buddy Rich Memorial Scholarship one year, which began my relationship with Zildjian. And the year I graduated, I actually won the Guitar Center Drum-Off in Boston. This was before it became a national event. Now it's the following year it became a national event, so all the regional winners would go to LA or would come to LA to compete. So mine ended at Boston, ended at the East Coast. But so yes, I called Kirsten, and I found myself in an audition for an artist named Billie Myers, and she had a single called Kiss the Rain. And that audition came through a guy named Barry, and Barry basically called and said, "Hey, look, I'm pretty sure we already got, the guy. Pretty sure we already got plenty of guys, but why don't you come down, play, I'll meet you, we'll take it from there." I said, "Okay, fine." And I was fortunate to come out of there with that gig. And that was, this is not, I don't know how necessarily typical this is, and especially in today's day and age, because things are very different now. But that was within, I was lucky and fortunate to be in the right place at the right time and land that within about 2.5 months of being here.
Wow,
so
that's impressive.
It was a great and fortunate confluence of events that
the stars aligned. Yeah,
the stars aligned, exactly.
And you were ready, to walk through the door, but you still had that, everything just fell in, a crack open in the universe for you.
Correct. And had that crack not opened, I would have been happy to go and apply for a job at Home Depot, and I would have done that, as long as it would have taken. But yeah, I was lucky and fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. And it was actually very my eyes popped wide open, because essentially that audition was a call. The song was Kiss the Rain, and she had a couple of other songs after that. But I remember playing the audition. I played all day. And then, if memory serves, there was a callback, and there were only 2 or 3 guys for the callback, and we played again all day, until I was the last remaining guy. And when that audition ended at around 9 or so, I'd been there all day. They basically had the remaining members, and they were like, "Okay, you're the band. We're playing Vibe tomorrow night." Sinbad. Remember, Sinbad had that show Vibe, remember?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, and literally it ended, and it was like, "Okay, we're playing Vibe tomorrow night. Rehearsal starts now. We're learning the single, and we're dialing it in so we can play it tomorrow night." And I was like, wait, what?
So that I imagine was your first national television
it was.
Experience.
I think it was. Hold on, let me make sure I'm right about that. Let's see. Before Billy was, yeah, I think so. And it was also an interesting, It was a great realization, Terry, because I'm going to shut up in 1 second. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm just on my mind is
we're good.
Thinking about that
stuff.
Yeah,
and then I'll get back to my other questions. Yeah.
Sure. I was just going to say, it was funny because part of my motivation to move out to LA was, as I'm in Boston and I'm watching fill in the blank new artist on whatever show it is, right? If it's whatever shows were of the era then. And I'm looking at the drummer playing, and a lot of my motivation was, that guy is doing that gig, or that girl, for example, is doing that gig because they live there. Mm-hmm. No one's going to find me in Boston. Billie Myers isn't finding me in Boston. Vanessa Carlton isn't finding me in Boston. Mm-hmm. I need to be where those gigs are. And so the Vibe thing happening, the first audition, and then the next day we're playing Vibe was a validation of my headspace in terms of being motivated to move out.
And your choice. Yeah. That's great. That's great that you got the validation quickly in the game. I had a similar experience. I ended up parking cars my first year. However, I got an audition for Billy Preston and went and toured Europe, and then came back and couldn't get arrested for a while. But however, it validated my choice of why it came out. Yeah,
you're so right. You're so right.
And so let's talk just a little bit about your current job. I don't want to focus the whole show on The Voice or your job, but it's important. One of the reasons that I'm interested in talking to you is because, again, we both have worked in television. And I think what a lot of people in our audience don't really know is how much happens behind the scenes of a music-intensive TV show. It really takes a village. Can you just talk about your support team and what a typical day or week is like regarding preparing for and executing the music for just a single episode?
I love that I get messages and calls from people and texts from people that say, hey man, so besides the voice, what are you up to? Right.
I try to sleep about 4 hours a night.
and I'll have to send it to you. I posted on my Instagram feed once, sort of me running down my week. I'll send that to you. I'll give it to you now as well. But people don't realize that even though the show is on for 2 hours Monday and 1 hour Tuesday, mm-hmm. The rest of the entire week goes into, putting those shows together. So when we're doing live shows, different parts of the show are different ways. Certain parts of the show are actually pre-recorded and they edit episodes and they put things together. But when we're doing the live shows, our week, I'll give it to you like this. The first, quote unquote, first day of our week is Wednesday. And so Wednesday for us, like I said, I'll give this to you as quickly and as briefly as I can. Mm-hmm. Our Wednesday will start around 10 o'clock in the morning. We'll learn whatever songs we have to rehearse that day with whatever artists we're rehearsing that day for probably about 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe.
Has Paul Merkovich already sent you MP3s and charts, or you straight up, you show up and start listening and reading?
The answer is yes. Paul Merkovich has sent me MP3s. However, I don't always listen to them. Yes, I show up and I hear them that first day.
Okay.
And I have a charting system that I use, so I don't really use the charts that, the guys do, normal traditional music charts. I have a roadmap charting system that I can usually deal with a song after listening down once. So we rehearse the first part of the day, and then we shoot reality the rest of the day. So the coaches will be there with their teams, their contestants, and so on, and we shoot that all day. So that's day one, Wednesday. Thursday, day two, we have second rehearsals with all of those contestants that we just saw. That's usually like a 3/4 day. Three-quarter length day. That might only be a 7-hour day, maybe 8. So then that's Wednesday, Thursday. Friday, we go into Henson Recording Studios in Hollywood, California, and we record the songs for iTunes. We record full-length versions for iTunes to be released concurrent with the performance on the show. That's right.
That's one of the things that I wanted you to bring up, because most people don't realize that in addition to performing live, you're making records every week.
I'll touch back. Let me circle back to that. Mm-hmm. So that's Friday. Saturday we rehearse all day for Monday's show. Sunday we rehearse all day for Tuesday's show. Monday we come in, dress rehearsal in the morning, Monday night show. Sometimes shoot reality after if necessary. And then Tuesday come in the morning, dress rehearsal, shoot Tuesday's show that night, and then Wednesday starts it all again. So if you notice, there was no day off there.
That's right.
That when those shows are happening, those Monday, Tuesdays in the live rounds, during the live shows, it's a 7-day-a-week job. Now, circling back to iTunes and making records, so Terry, you and I are about the same age. So let's think back. Remember record stores?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Remember like flipping through the stacks and just looking at the records. Remember buying a record and opening it and looking at the liner notes to see who played on it. He said,
I live for liner notes. Yeah. Right. That's what made me want to, make records and tour. Yep. Exactly.
So unfortunately that doesn't happen as much today, but yes, we as a band, I gotta say that, mind you, we are re-recording songs that existed for the most part. But yes, we have recorded at this point for iTunes, I could take a stab at well over 1,000, probably more than 2,000. And at one point, several seasons back, the RIAA came to the show and presented The Voice with a 20 million singles sold plaque. And
that's great.
That's that was several seasons ago. I feel like that might have been season 6, 7, and we're into season, 17 now? 16, 17? It's actually crazy that I'm sitting here and I'm losing track of how many seasons we've done. Yeah. But, so yes, we've recorded a lot of material. Now, lastly, and to really put the period on your question, that's what my work week looks like. That's what our recording looks like. In terms of the family that makes the whole show go, our music department is the band, and then we have a group of people who work within our department, the producers, music producers, PAs, techs, music copyists, people who do the arrangements and all of that. And that's the music department. And then that all works within this bigger, giant machine, which includes grips and carpenters and drivers and the executive producers of the show and the directors and all of the audio department and just everything. And it's a really giant thing that operates as one big family. And whenever we're asked, like, wow, how do you guys all get along so well? Like, why do you get along so well? It's something. And our standard answer is we have to. We have to get along so well, because if we didn't, we couldn't do this job.
Right. And you refer to, sometimes I've seen you refer to the band on the show as your family. And I understand that, it's from what you just spelled out with your schedule. You spend more time with them than you actually do on some weeks with your chosen family.
As cliched as that sounds, it is true. There are definitely weeks where I see my big brothers and so on in the band and the people that work with me in the band department, in the music department, more than I see my own family.
Right. Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, it is always good to come home at night, sleep in my own bed, get up in the morning, see my kids off to school. If I'm up, sometimes I'm lazy and they're off before I get up. But,
you got to rest too. And, and that's one of the things, like, do you take good care of yourself? Do you manage to get to the gym or eat healthy, or are you lazy, like you said, and use the time just to rest and recoup?
I find opportunities to do things when they present themselves. So, for example, Universal, where we record, is at the bottom of a really big hill down from City Walk. So on lunch, maybe instead of just lunching, maybe I walk, that hill. Maybe I walk that hill and back. Once upon a time, I made it to the gym far more frequently than I do anymore. And as I'm sitting here in my studio, I'm looking at my very nice road bike that I haven't been on in ages, and it's saying to me, Nate, I miss you. Nate, let's go for a ride. So maybe I'll be inspired and I'll jump on that thing later on. But I typically, I get out on the tennis court with my 13-year-old, and he decimates me. And I get out on the tennis court with my 7-year-old, and I run around with her. So I like to try to maintain an active lifestyle, but if I'm honest, I don't make it to the gym as frequently as I should. And a lot of my activity I have to sort of squeeze in around other things, or a lot of my activity is built around my kids' activities.
Do you have well, that sounds healthy. I mean, not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, and smart. Do you have your job is very physical, and you pound the crap out of drums, and I mean, you also play with nuance, but you're a hard hitter. Do you have a regular warm up or anything that you do to protect yourself, or do you just get out there and do a couple wrist stretches and just hit it?
I do what I can do dependent upon the time that I have. And so as I've gotten older, I have made it a point to designate, all right, you know what? I should be sitting at the pad 20 minutes to 30 minutes before we start so that I can kind of warm up so I don't hurt myself.
Right.
So I do. As I've gotten older, that has increased. When I was younger, again, my buddy Tony DiAugustine came to see me. I was playing with Dale Bozio on Missing Persons. This is ages ago. This is, 25 years ago. And I'm playing, and the Missing Persons gig, obviously you're following the great Terry Bozzio. So everyone's sitting there watching you as the drummer with their arms crossed, impress me.
Right.
And so which is basically code for play a lot of notes. So I would go out and I would do that gig, and I'm playing, I'm going crazy. And I came off the stage, and I was talking to my buddy Tony, and Tony goes, yeah, man, that was crazy. What do you do to warm up? And I go, warm up? And he just looks at me, and he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he goes, aw, aren't you cute?
That's great.
So yes, but yeah, as I've gotten older, now I definitely do warm up. And I'm fortunate that what I get to do on the show is more pocket based and more groove based, so I don't have to come out and burn chops or anything like that. Right. So, but you
still get to dig in and have fun. I mean, and by the way, and I say this with the utmost respect, especially having music directed to late night talk shows, I actually think you guys probably have the best band on TV as a band because of the diversity of the styles that you're able to do and the authenticity and the attitude. I love your band and Paul's band and from season one. You know, you guys caught my attention. It's like these guys are digging in, and they're not a one trick pony. So I just wanted to compliment all of you collectively, and for doing such beautiful work.
That's amazing, Terry, and thank you so much. And that means a lot, particularly coming from yourself. I would say this. I would say that we are lucky, and we are. I don't know if you know this or not, but Sasha, my bass player, Paul, musical director, and myself have played together, dating years back prior to The Voice. We actually played together the first time as a unit. I played with Sasha in 2002 with Vanessa Carlton, and then we actually played together as a rhythm section, Paul, Sasha, and myself, in 2005 on the CBS television show Rockstar. And we progressed through different gigs, different TV shows together as a unit. We played with, we were backing Cher at Caesar's Palace, which included Dave Barry on guitar, who also plays in The Voice band. Mm-hmm. And then Eric Daniels came on at the beginning of The Voice run, and I guess what I'm getting at is we've now played collectively so much material together that I sort of liken it to as if we're all terminals operating from the same mainframe. Right, because there are times when you'll be playing a song, we'll be playing a tune, and just collectively the band feels like, you know what, there should be a build on bar 8 with a stop on beat 3, coming back in on the downbeat at the top of the chorus. Right. And it'll just happen. And it's not on the original, but we just kind of all feel that that's where it should go. Right. So we benefit from that. It's not like a bunch of dudes who show up, read charts, collect check, go home. I mean, literally, when I say that these guys are my family, I mean it. Paul is like a big brother to me, Sasha as well, Eric as well. Not Justin. He's a little brother. He's the one that prevents me from being the youngest in the band. So, yeah.
Well, it comes through, and I had the opportunity, the very first season, my wife, Melanie Taylor, was one of the singers in your band, in the house band. That's right. So I remember coming to hear you guys play for the season, the finale, and I really felt it. Like but I knew, because I remembered, you all first came to my attention in Rockstar, INXS show. I tilted when I heard that show because there was something pretty special about the band, energetically and musically. I want to ask you a question, and I'm going to ask for a short answer, even though we could do a whole show on this, because I want to ask you a few more personal things. We've only got about 10 minutes left in our conversation. But from your perspective, having both worked with a lot of very established, well-known, high-visibility artists, as well as working in multiple television shows where you're dealing with people who don't have a lot of experience, they're up and coming, they're getting thrown into the limelight. What's your observation? What's your perspective about these reality TV shows and music and people stepping to the front of the line without having the experience, the life experience to back it? Because you've been doing a lot of these TV shows over the years that have led to The Voice. This is not. I'm just curious. Like, what do you observe?
One of the things that I try to do on The Voice is I try, anyway, to exude the idea that we are that artist's band, that contestant's band, because a lot of them do come in and sometimes lack experience of performing with a band. And so we've seen so many contestants that there's such a wide array. So I will try to be brief with this. There are contestants who come in who have been writing, recording, releasing music on their own for many, many years and playing clubs for many, many years. Well,
see, you're one. Our friend we've both recorded with, Javier Colon.
Absolutely.
Jav, he had a major record deal
Absolutely.
Before that show.
Right.
So, case in point.
Sure. And then there are others who come in, like, if I'm not mistaken, like Danielle Bradbury, who had never performed live in front of people. We have contestants who come on the show and they say, I've never performed in front of an audience.
Wow.
And, it's like, okay, congratulations. Your first audience is 15 million people.
So focus. Right.
So I can't cookie cutter it. And there's some who come in, so I'll be honest with you, there's some contestants who come in and think that they know more than they actually do. There's some contestants who come in and they're actually more talented than they even realize themselves, and they experience sort of a metamorphosis live on national TV.
That's exciting.
So it is very exciting. So it's so all over the map. It's hard to say, but those would be my observations. If just off the top of my head and giving you a sort of a brief answer. But it's one of the things that's interesting is sometimes contestants who come in, let's say you're on a level 1 to 10. Sometimes contestants who come in who've had a ton of experience and they're polished as they're going to get, and they've got their licks down and they play well, and they walk into the show an 8.5.
Mm-hmm.
Conversely, someone might walk in the show, they're completely unpolished, they've never really done this, but they're like a diamond in the rough. So they may come in the show at a 4. The 8.5 might be pretty set at their 8.5-ness. I've been doing this. I know what I'm doing. I know how to sing. I don't need an instructor for this. I got it. And they might go off the show an 8.5. That 4 that comes in that's never been nurtured, that's never had the exposure, might come on the show a 4. Exactly, and support. Might come on the show a 4 and go off the show a 10.
Right.
And that just has to do with how open you are to taking it in. Here's the last thing I'll say about it. You're talking about coming from an environment. Maybe you've sung in, the Champaign, Illinois all your life, and nobody knows you outside of that. Now you're on this show, and now you're on Team Blake, and you're getting advice from Blake Shelton. You're getting to see the best vocal coaches in the world. You're getting to perform on stages built by the best carpenters in the world. You know what I'm saying? Like on the show, you're getting choreographed by the best choreographers in the world. Depending on how far you progress on the show, you're being complimented with dancers or string players or horn sections, and then you're playing with the house band and whatever. It's like a music education that you could not pay for. Like, you could not buy that.
Oh, right. Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So that's, so I think the people who come in and the people who are the most open and the people who most recognize that get the most out of the experience. So even if they don't go off and become stars, because not everybody becomes a star, wherever they were in their musical walk, when they return, they're several steps beyond that.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So.
It does, and that's a really beautiful answer to that question. We have 5 minutes left, and I've got 3 questions, and they're personal and important.
I'll do rapid fire. Go for it.
Great. Since this show, well, let me start with this. What are 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Listen to as much music as possible. Play as much music as possible with as many people as possible. Stay in touch with as many people as possible at all times.
Great. Since the show is called Making It, what does making it mean to you, both personally and professionally?
When I was younger, making it meant having a roof over my head, being able to do what I love. And that really hasn't changed. I just have to have a roof over more people's heads.
Well said.
Okay.
And how has that changed? I mean, professionally and personally.
In terms of having a level of responsibility, how has that changed? Or maybe it hasn't. Well, I mean, it really hasn't. I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but really that's the truth. I mean, at the end of the day, I get to do what I love, and getting to do what I love and providing for the people that I love combine for a pretty happy existence. So I'm very fortunate to do what I do, and but I hesitate to say that I've quote unquote made it.
The show is not called Made It. It's
exactly
called Making It, and there's a reason. I agree with you.
Well, that's what people say sometimes. Like, how did you know you had made it? And I go, I'll let you know when it happens.
Right.
Because for me, it's just a progressive linear thing. If I have 30 seconds, I'll just summarize it like this.
Yes.
So dating back to like getting the gig with Billy Myers. Yay, I've got the gig with Billy Myers. I've moved to LA and I've gotten a gig. The next gig that I did was with a little bit bigger artists, let's say. And I go, oh, that's neat. Now I'm playing bigger venues. Maybe the next gig was, I don't even know, a gig on a television show. And so it was never like at any one point I was like, now I'm done. You know, it was never that. It's always been this linear progression, one thing to the next thing to the next thing.
Right. Nate, the final question is, at this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
I would tell my younger self, keep doing what you're doing and don't rush. Breathe and be in the moment of what you're doing when you're doing it and appreciate it, because it only happens that one time. So enjoy the journey, and that's more what it's about than necessarily the destination. Beautiful. Beautifully said. Well, you actually did the speed dating version of answering those questions. We have 2 minutes left in the show, and since this show is completely unedited and we can talk about anything, is there anything on your mind or heart that you'd like to share with our listeners in the last 2 minutes or so? Can I plug something? Yes, absolutely. Class A? Would it be day Class A for me to plug something? No, absolutely. Please do. You started the show with it, then you asked me about it, and then because my head was so buzzing and whirring around like it always is, I absolutely didn't answer it. But the track that played following your opening theme is a track off of a record called Poptosis by a band called Fraud Prophets. And that band includes myself and Sean Halley, who is a dear, dear friend of mine, multi-instrumentalist. And we released it not so long ago, and it is available. It is a collection of sort of what I'll call mainstream jazz fusion, in the sense that it's fusion because it's a variety of different styles and it kind of goes all over the map, and it's jazz because there are solos and there is a fair amount of improvisation, but it's also mainstream because you do come away from it actually singing a melody or actually remembering, you know, a song as opposed to not. So it's sort of pop mainstream jazz fusion. Fraud Prophets, FRAUDPROPHETS, and it is available on CD Baby and Amazon Music and iTunes and everywhere that you pick up music that you dig. So and we're actually going, thanks for talking about that, because that was on my list of things to get to. We are going to put a link to that on our EnterTalk Media page that's set up for this episode. So if you want to go back and restream this episode or download it, you'll have Nate's Instagram and Facebook and links to this. I also, do me a quick favor. After the show, you also had an album. Your very first solo album was called Playground Philosophy, and it's based on this philosophy that your dad taught you. And I'd love for you to just write something about that on Facebook once we link this episode. So that people, I just really wanted to hear more about that story because it's pretty cool. Nate, thank you for spending the hour with me. I really appreciate your time and your talent. Was it an hour, Terry? It felt like about 3.5 minutes. I know, it flies by. Oh, man. And everybody, thank you for spending the hour with Nate and I. We both really appreciate it. We'll see you all next week. Thanks, Nate. You got it, buddy.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Woman.